to Steve Ripka.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Michaela. As Michaela mentioned, we are going to be going over the communicable elements or properties of the Belimo energy valve. For those of you who do or don't know, the energy valve is a electronic pressure independent valve that has some control capabilities, including a delta T manager routine. Today we're not really going to talk about the functionality of the energy valve, but more the communication side of it, how we tie into it, how we make adjustments to it, and how it can be connected to via BACnet. For those of you who do or don't know, the energy valve has both an embedded web server as well as a BACnet application-specific controller in the valve's actuator itself. So the very first thing you may want to do when you get your energy valve is tie into it to take a look at the settings, maybe see how it's functioning, take a look and see if there's any functional errors that have occurred during startup and commissioning. What you can do, there are two ways to connect TCP over IP. One is via a static IP address, and what you'll have to do is go into the Network and Sharing Center under Control Panel and set a static IP address to your TCP over IP version 4 settings. Here you can see we have a static IP address set of 192.168.0.200 with a standard subnet of 255.255.255.0. Once you've set these addresses in the subnet in the settings, click OK. You'll have to restart your PC. Once your PC is rebooted, you can then use a standard Ethernet cable, connect the cable from your PC to the actuator's Ethernet port, open up a web browser and type in 192.168.0.10:8080, and it will bring you to our login screen. The other approach is connecting dynamically, so we don't need to go ahead and make the changes to our static IP address in the Network and Sharing Center under Manage or Change Adapter Settings. We simply open a web browser, either Internet Explorer, Firefox, Safari, whichever you prefer to use. Type in the web address belimo.local:80, and that too will bring you into our login screen. Here we see the login screen, so essentially it's a sort of splash screen that shows up, and it allows you 3 different user levels that you can access. The first user level is just our guest level, which has no read-write properties whatsoever. So it will let you see the standard web pages like the dashboard, overview, the data logging charts, the settings, the statuses, anything of that nature, but it won't let you make any changes at the guest level. The next thing we have is the maintenance level, which actually gives you quite a bit of access to read-write capabilities. The first 4 or 5 web pages are basically just view-only pages in the maintenance setting, and then it will allow you to go and reset or look at the error states, adjust the date and time, view the IP settings, things of that nature. Finally, we have an administrative level setting, which here you see on the screen. We do not openly provide the username or password for that. You have to contact either Belimo Tech Support or your local district sales manager, the admin level password. And with the admin level password, it allows you to go in and actually make changes to the settings to the valve, essentially reconfigure the settings so the valve will function differently for specific flow rates, delta T manager routines, things of that nature. So again, if you are a higher level tech or user and you need to get in at that admin level, either contact our tech support folks or your local sales manager, and he or she can get you those credentials. When you first tie into the Belimo Energy Valve's web server, you're going to see a couple of web pages that look like this. The first one you'll come to is the dashboard, which basically shows the upper portion of the screen we're looking at here. So the image of the valve, the entering and leaving pipes with the temperature sensors. You'll see valve position, flow, calculated, power, and the power can be calculated or selected for watts, kW, BTUs per hour, kBTUs per hour, or even tons. Calculated differential temp, our flow, valve position. The next page is the overview page, which includes very much the same information that the dashboard has, as well as the 3 blocks you see at the bottom. You'll see the totalized heating or cooling energy, depending on the application. So of course, if it's a cooling valve, you won't see totalized heating energy and vice versa. Something nice about this is one of the statistics or vitals it gives you is the actual current control mode for the valve. So you can see if we're in position control, flow control, etc., and so on. You can see if the valve is being overridden. And when I say if the valve's being overridden, that means if the override has been done locally by someone before you tying into the valve via the WebView access. So there's a way to override the valves either via WebView or maybe BACnet. So it's slightly different than, say, overriding your analog output to 10 volts DC. If you simply override the analog output, you'll see set point of 100% or 10 volts DC, and the valve won't know that it's being overridden. It will just see a 10 volt signal input. The other thing it will let you know is the status of the delta T functioning limit, and that will let you know, are we in delta T limiting mode? Are we in standby mode? Has delta T manager not been enabled or not been selected for use? So that is our overview page. That's one of the first web pages you'll see when you take a look at the energy valve through the web server. Again, we have the totalized values of flow, heating, and cooling energy. Delta T Manager active, which you'll see here in the middle next to the differential temperature calculation, and as well as power up the center where the bubbles are. For the flow, heating, and cooling and active Delta T Manager, we'll do current sum of today, corresponding sum of yesterday, totalization for yesterday, last month, and last year, and total time that the valve has been operational. For power totalization, we'll give you a maximum peak of today, yesterday, and last month. Here what we're looking at is the settings page. So this is one of the pages that you can only access via the administrative level. So if you have the admin and the proper password for the admin level, here's where you can get in and actually make the changes to the energy valve. And if we look at these blocks from top left down to the bottom right, you can see the first one, application, is pretty basic stuff. The valve size itself, installation position, whether it be in the return or supply line of the air handler. That is important so we calculate our BTUs correctly and we know that we're in a cooling mode for a chilled water application. Whether the media be chilled water alone or a glycol-based chilled water solution, length of the remote temp sensor, then our user configuration units for temperature, flow, power, energy, things like that. Those can all be adjusted based on the information you or your customer wants to see, and of course the region you're in if Celsius is preferred over Fahrenheit. At the top middle we see our control mode functionality, which is configuration control function, and we can select position control, which would be our standard pressure dependent valve functionality, flow control, which is the most standard, and that is pressure independent functionality. The valve is looking at the flow meter reading, comparing it to the DDC input signal, and making sure we maintain a specific flow rate, and then another function called power control. Here we can also adjust our input signal, invert the signal if we want to reverse or direct acting control routine. Below that we can configure our feedback, whether you want valve position, flow. We can also do supply or return water temp, delta T, or power. The signal for the feedback can be ranged either 0 to 10, 2 to 10, 0.5 to 10. To the right on the top, that's where we would select our delta T limiting function. So if you do or don't want to use the delta T manager capabilities of the valve, that's where you would turn it on. Below that, configuration flow would be associated with the flow control mode, so you would give it a maximum flow rate. Configuration power would be associated with power control mode. And what we don't see pictured here is a delta T set point. So if you do select delta T manager or delta T manager scaling, it will ask you for a specific set point for that functionality. We have a couple pages for trending. We have a data log chart and a historic trending chart. And here you can take a look at either what has been going on in the valve historically, so you can actually reference the existing data that's stored in the valve, which is stored for either up to 31 days in short term or 13 months in long term, or you can do a live trend, so you can actually select some points you'd like to look at, say the DDC input from the controller, maybe the flow and the associated delta T, and watch them run live for an hour period of time. We will store totalized values for heating, cooling, and flow, of course. And you'll have historic monthly intervals that you can reference. You'll see, you can compare to earlier versions of the energy valve, we've added a right axis, y-axis, as well as a left y-axis, and sort of improved the scaling to make this a little easier to read. We have something called the status page, and the status page is where we can do some troubleshooting, take a look if we've had any problems with our temp sensors, possibly there was air in the system during startup, things of that nature. If maybe the valve hasn't been adapted or configured properly, or our signals aren't matching and we're seeing flow where we might think the valve is closed. You can see how these errors are detailed not only in days but in hours and a number of occurrences. And on the BACnet side, these errors will be visible via BACnet bits. I mentioned a little bit earlier when we spoke about the data log chart and historic trends that we do store trend information in the energy valve. And as we can see here, we have two different file types. We have a short-term range file that is a 31-day uncompressed file that's going to take a sampling of the objects every 30 seconds. And then we have a longer-term storage, which is up to 13 months. And that's going to take snapshots of the objects every 2 hours or less. These files will be stored in the valve. You will have up to 31 days of uncompressed short-term data and up to 13 months of compressed long-term data. This is a first in, first out, so once you reach the 32nd day, the first day that was data logged on the short term will start to move out, and you'll have the second day. And with 13 months, once you exceed 13 months, the first month will be deleted, and the next month that's being data logged will be stored in the valve itself. They can be exported directly out of the Energy Valve's web server if you like, and stored on your PC for either referencing directly in the CSV file or using our data analysis tool, which we have made some nice developments to. And as you can see here, we are looking at what we call the dashboard page for Data Analysis Tool version 4.08. I believe this new version of the Data Analysis Tool will be available sometime in September. We do have beta versions of it available at the time. If you would like to take a look at the beta version of the new Data Analysis Tool and you have some experience using the legacy or older version of the tool, just simply reach out to your local DSM and he or she can provide you a beta version. But again, we should be going live with the new one within the month of September. Some of this may look different to y'all. For those of you who have not used the data analysis tool, this probably is new. But two things that are new here are, if we look at the bottom tabs, we see something called the Network Data File Import tab, as well as a Network Data File Download tab. These two tabs make it very easy and very quick and efficient to download the CSV files that are stored in the energy valve. What we are looking at here is the Network Data File Import tab, and what this will do is this will import files from the energy valve into the data analysis tool directly, so you can go ahead and take a look at the trends, the curves, the information, the statistics of the valve right away. So it takes it off the energy valve and puts it directly in the analysis tool. What you'll do is you'll select whether you want to retrieve daily or monthly files. You'll have to put in the IP address of the energy valve. So here we see the 192.168.0.10 default address. You can check connection. Essentially, this is like pinging it through command prompt. So it'll make sure that you are communicating with the energy valve. And then you get to do the simple select data files or get data files. Now what will happen is if you're using this for the first time, it will ask you, has the EV tool plugin tool been installed? The first time you see this message, you'll have to select no. And then you'll go to download the EV plugin tool here on the bottom left. Once you select that download EV plugin tool and you're connected to the internet, you will get the EV plugin tool check, and it will tell you that the plugin tool is simply installing a file on your computer and it's not installing any software. If you're okay with that, you click OK. Then what will happen is you will go back to select Get Data Files, hit the Get Data Files tab, and it will start to download the data files. And you'll get this message, press OK when data files have finished downloading. Now you may wonder, well, how do I know these data files are downloading? I don't see anything about that. This little command prompt box will show up down on your taskbar. So while the command prompt box is present, your files will be downloading. Once that command prompt box goes away, your files are done, you can click OK, and then you'll come to this page here where you can see we have under local disk C the data logger file and the data file. And it's going to have all the files that you have installed with the name you've given to this air handler. So the nice thing is with the data analysis tool download, when you put a name in for the air handler unit or the fan coil unit that you're selecting the files from, it will name not only the folder, but the files inside the folder with the air handler or equipment name you give it. So everything gets named for you, so you don't have to guess which files you're looking at. When you come to this stage of the game, you select all the files you want to import into the tool. So you select air handler 1 2016 June 13th, and then maybe the 16th or all 5 or 6, however many you want to take a look at. Select open and they will populate the data analysis tool. So then you'll be ready to take a look at all this information that you've extracted out of that valve in the data analysis tool format. You can also give it a customer name, an air handler, or equipment reference so you know what you're looking at. And then within the tool there are things you can do like create PDF files, etc. and so on, and it will have the appropriate name of the equipment and the customer associated with the file. Finally, if you want to, you can delete the files from your hard drive. So if you only want to populate this data analysis tool and either provide a customer with it or take a look at it, you don't have to save all the raw CSV files on your PC. So that's what this message here gives you the option to do. The other thing you can do with the data analysis tool, and this is a nice improvement from where we were previously, is simply use the tool to download the files, and then you can look at them at a later time. So they won't populate the data analysis tool. They will simply go to your C drive under that data file we looked at, and you can come back and reference them at a later date. So again, we'd select whether we are going to retrieve the day or the month files, month meaning M meaning month, D meaning day. Here we can see that we have a space where we can select the number of valves we want to retrieve data from. So if you have multiple energy valves networked to a switch, and you can tie onto that switch or that LAN, you can put in multiple IP addresses with multiple unit IDs, ping them to make sure they're all connecting, and then it will download the files from all of these valves, whether they be monthly or daily files. So again, we put our IP addresses in with the specific unit ID or unit name. We hit ping to make sure we're communicating. We hit download data files, and all the files will be in fact imported to our computer. And here on the right you can see the file structure under local disk C. We've installed the EV data logger file. Under the subfile data we see air handler 1. If you use multiple IP addresses, air handler 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., will populate underneath the data file. So for those of you who are familiar with the energy valve and have gone through the process of downloading the CSV files one by one, you can see this is a nice improvement and makes the process of acquiring the data out of the valve a whole lot easier and a whole lot faster. The data we collect here is going to include flow, delta T, time, energy and power output, as well as totalized energy, and you can select different plots and points to populate the graphs here that we see on the data analysis tool. Another way to communicate with the energy valve is what we call the ZTH-US. So this is a small gateway that has a 2-line LCD display. Some of you may recognize this device if you've used the Belimo PC tool. This is the gateway to use PC tool to connect to an MFT actuator as well. But here you can simply take the cable provided, plug it directly into the actuator on the energy valve. It will power up the ZTH-US. The ZTH will discover the energy valve, and then you can go through and you can make some adjustments to the valve settings. You can override the energy valve, change control signal or mode. You can program delta T set points, see if you've got any sensor failures or issues with your sensors not reading accurately. But most importantly, or one of the things I really like about this ZTH-US, and the thing I use it for most commonly, is if you've got an energy valve where the IP address has been changed, and either it has not been documented or someone has forgotten what that IP address is, the ZTH-US can be used for an IP address discovery. So if you do not know the IP address of your existing energy valve and you plug in the ZTHUS, it will find the IP address for you. So at the very least, you can rediscover your IP address with the ZTHUS, a great tool just as a safety if you're networking your valves and somewhere along the line a couple IP addresses get misplaced. As I said, we connect directly to the face of the energy valve. So you can see here we have the small connection point. You open the cover, simply put the connector into the energy valve's actuator. It'll power up the ZTHUS and discover it and provide you all the information and the ability to make the changes you'd like to make. As I mentioned earlier on in the presentation, the energy valve is does not only have a web server in it, but it's also a BACnet application-specific controller that can communicate either via BACnet over MSTP or BACnet over IP, and it is a BACnet-listed device with BACnet testing laboratories. To address your energy valve for BACnet over MSTP, you do have to tie into the valve via TCP over IP like we spoke about in the first few slides. Once you get into the valve's web server, you can go to the BACnet over MSTP settings and change your BACnet addresses for your BACnet network. So here you can see you can select your baud rate, provide your appropriate MSTP address and device instance. You can give the device a specific name if you'd like. And if, in fact, this is the very last device on a BACnet segment, we do have a virtual 120 ohm end-of-line resistor that can be selected. The BACnet IP settings are on the same page, and here you would just select BACnet over IP as opposed to MSTP. Our UDP port is going to default to 47808. You can select whether it's a simple foreign device, and if so, you can put in the IP address of the BACnet broadcast management device and the time to live associated with that device. Our IP settings are pretty standard. You'd go to the IP settings page, put in your host address, network mask, and gateway, and select Change IP Configuration. Of course, you will select whether it's a static or a dynamic hosted IP address as well. In our technical document and our communications document, you will find our PIC statement, our protocol implementation conformance statement, and you can see the energy valve is a BACnet application-specific controller, and all of our read, write, and data sharing properties are going to be B. So all the property types will be B with the BACnet version or side of the BLEMO energy valve. It supports standard object types, analog inputs, outputs, values, binary values, multi-state values and outputs, all the standard objects that are associated with the BACnet application-specific controller. And if you need any more detailed information on the functionality and setup of the energy valve, you can reference the BLEMO energy valve technical documentation that you see here on the left. If you simply need communication information, especially the info related to the BACnet side, including an object list and things of that nature, we have a shorter energy valve communications document. They can be both downloaded here from the webinar, or they are available at energyvalve.com. So with that said, I appreciate everyone's time, and thank you all for attending our webinar on communicating with the BLEMO energy valve.
All right, thank you so much, Steve. So while you all are typing in those questions in the questions box, just want to remind anyone who joined us partway through the webinar, this was recorded and will be posted to our BLEMO website as well as our YouTube channel. If you look on the right-hand side of your screen, you should see a handout option, and in that handouts section, there are 3 downloadable documents. So Steve was talking about the communicating with the energy valve communication document, as well as the energy valve tech doc, and then there's a energy valve, there is a PDF version of this presentation that you can download directly. So Steve, I have a couple questions coming through. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay, first question. In the past, when downloading .csv files from the energy valve, I had to select and download each file individually. Do I still have to download the files individually?
Well, you would still have to download those files individually if you are tying directly into the Energy Valve's web server without the new data analysis tool. Once you have the new data analysis tool, you can use the tool to tie into the Energy Valve via its IP address, and it will do a batch download either directly into the data analysis tool, or it will store the C drives on your the files on your C drive in your computer. So with the new tool, you will not have to select them individually, and it should save you a whole bunch of time.
Okay. Next question. Are all the usernames and passwords for the Energy Valve available in the tech document or on the website?
Unfortunately, no. The guest username and password is available, so that would be guest and guest. The maintenance username and password, which is maintenance for the new username, and Belimo, which is the password, are available. At that level, you only have certain read-write capabilities. You can read, write, and make changes to the status or the error tab, the date and time tab, the IP settings, and you can view and change the version information. But at the maintenance level, you cannot change the settings in the Energy Valve. So that is to say, you can't reconfigure or reprogram the Energy Valve at the maintenance level. That would require admin user credentials to do any reprogramming. Those credentials or that password you can get either from tech support or again from your local district sales manager.
Okay. Next question. Is there a way to discover the IP address for a currently installed Energy Valve?
Yes, there is, and that is again by using our ZTH US tool. The ZTH will actually go into the Energy Valve, download its settings, its configurations, and also one of the things that will populate on the two-line LCD of the ZTH is going to be the IP address. So if for some reason you misplaced or lost or taken over a job with an existing Energy Valve and you don't know the IP address in it, you can use our ZTH to find that.
All right, so it looks like that's all the questions we have for today. I want to thank everyone who has joined us today for the webinar. Thank you so much, Steve. You did a great job as always. Just want to give you some information for the next webinar, which will be on September 15th, and that's going to be a supplier-sponsored webinar through ASHRAE, on dynamic balancing. So once again, I think we have one more question. Nope, just a thank you. Thank you. You're welcome. So if you are interested in finding out more information about the Energy Valve, please feel free to visit energyvalve.com. If you have any additional questions after the webinar is ended, please feel free to email us at marketing@us.belimo.com. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a great day.